It's Monday, and you know what that means. The Jersey First Television Network proudly brings to you the latest edition of Real Talk. And certainly, I am the generational talent in Garden State Media, and certainly your leader for trustworthy opinion journalism. That's right, folks. It's me, Fernando Uribe. Happy Monday. Hope you all had a wonderful Mother's Day weekend. Shout out to all the moms out there. Of course, the most important moms in my life, my own mom, my aunt, my bestie. Really incredible women that make a significant contribution to my life. And again, to all the moms out there, to the women that give us life, but also show us how to live a life. Yes, shout out to all the moms during this past Mother's Day weekend. And I want to thank you for tuning in from wherever and however you may be doing so on this, the 11th of May in 2026. Folks, if you have not done so already, what are you waiting for? It takes a few seconds. Make sure you like us on Facebook. Of course, follow us on Instagram and X. And certainly, if you have not done so yet, make sure you subscribe to Jersey First TV on our YouTube channel. Like, comment, and share. It really helps the show grow and demonstrate your support for fearless, independent journalism. That's right, folks. Don't accept it from the imitators. Take it from the originator, Fernando Uribe, here every Monday Night Live with the Real Talk. And of course, whether you get your podcasts on Spotify or SoundCloud, favorite Jersey First on those platforms, and you'll be automatically notified of all the great content we bring you every week here on the Jersey First Television Network. And of course, folks, I'm proud to lead the way here, always educating and advocating for the residents here in the great state of New Jersey. That's right, brand new episodes of Real Talk premiere every Monday. Check your local listings, of course, for start times. And of course, brand new episodes of Bridging the Gap have returned to Jersey First TV. Check out the start times, and of course, make that a part of your regular viewing every single week here with Jersey First TV. Folks, a jam-packed show today. And again, before we even begin, it is National Police Week. And here on Jersey First TV and on Real Talk with Fernando Uribe, we are proud to back the blue and really support all our brave men and women in blue that work hard in all of our municipalities, certainly local police departments, state police, sheriff's officers, officers at the federal level. Again, folks, that's what we do here on this show. We support our police officers. We don't support defunding the police and all that woke bullshit that progressives in the left, had you believe years ago. No, folks, here on this program and on Jersey First, we back the blue every single week, and especially during National Police Week. A little bit more about the significance later on in the program. Folks, you would definitely want to stick around for final thoughts. As you know, I like to call out all the bad actors in New Jersey, whether it's in academia. We have beta males and cucks like Joe Amaditis from Woke State University over there in Montclair, useless journalists like Alan Steinberg and Max Pizarro and David Cruz, as well as Bob Hennelly and Matt Friedman, and also like useless government employees like Maria Rodriguez and useless elected officials like Ravi Bala, Katie Brennan, and more. But of course, folks, when we think about useless elected officials, guess who comes to mind? That's right, folks. It is, as you can see there, Anthony Veneri. And as us Cubans like to say, este hombre no sirve para nada. Este no sirve para nada. And I'm being kind here when I talk about Anthony Veneri, but I'll tell you about why, quite frankly, some news that broke last week via the New Jersey Globe got me laughing at Anthony Veneri. And what else is new? There's always something to laugh about when it comes to Anthony Veneri, but more on that during final thoughts. You definitely do not want to miss out on that one. And from one useless retard to the other, yeah, folks, we can always talk about progressives, obviously, like Ron Batista, running for county commissioner in Hoboken. And I'll tell you more about why his campaign is just as full of shit like many other progressives are in today's political climate. All that and more during final thoughts. You definitely want to stick around for that one. Folks, it's election season, but it's also budget season here in New Jersey. And of course, for all of us taxpayers, us homeowners and property owners, we're concerned about how our tax dollars are spent in Trenton. And I got to tell you, folks, just again, a little bit of a civics lesson here. Here in New Jersey, as bound by our state constitution, a budget has to be signed and ratified, actually first, has to be ratified by both chambers of the legislature in both the state assembly and the state senate. And it has to go before the governor's desk no later than 11:59 p.m. on June 30th. And if it does not, well, we've seen it in recent decades, obviously in 2006 under Governor John Corzine, and we started in 2017 under Governor Chris Christie, a state will shut down. And we've avoided some catastrophes over the years, especially during the 8 years of Phil Murphy. But that's always something to look out for during budget season. And who better to talk about budget season and, quite frankly, all the irresponsible spending and the taxes and everything that the left is doing in Trenton to really almost bankrupt this state. Folks, let's catch up with a fan of the show. And he is the distinguished assemblyman in the 13th Legislative District. Folks, he's a good friend of mine and a fan of the show, surprisingly. He is Assemblyman Gerard Scharfenberger, joins us live on Real Talk. Assemblyman, welcome.
Thank you, Fernando. Absolutely great to be here.
I appreciate your time. And again, folks, if you're not familiar with the 13th Legislative District, great part of New Jersey in Monmouth County. It includes municipalities such as Aberdeen Township, Atlantic Highlands, Hazlitt Highlands, Homedale Township, Keensburg, Keyport, Little Silver, Marlborough Township, Middletown Township, Monmouth Beach, Oceanport, Rumson, Seabright, Union Beach, and West Long Branch. A really nice part of the state in the 13th Legislative District. So, Assemblyman, welcome here. As I just broke it down for our audience, obviously it is budget season, and the state constitution mandates a budget be signed by no later than 11:59 p.m. on June the 30th, or the state will shut down. We've lived through that. We've avoided some catastrophes in recent years, but I know you're on the budget committee in Trenton, and I'm sure you're as outraged as I am. We were talking last week at Alex Sedon's event in Perth Amboy. I know you're as much a fiscal conservative as I am, but quite frankly, I mean, how much do you want to rip your hair out when you're looking at this current budget, or at least the budget that's being proposed right now in Trenton?
You know, Fernando, it's painful. And I say that every year because every year it gets more and more painful. And you know what the problem is, too? I mean, one of many. But when Phil Murphy first took over, the budget that he inherited from Chris Christie was about $34.5 billion. We're up to a whopping $60.7 billion. This is unsustainable. You cannot keep going at this rate without imploding at some point or taxing people completely out of existence. And make no mistake about it, there are not enough millionaires in this state to shoulder the raises that we see year after year. And that's, you know, budgeting is a very, very exact science. And, you know, we just can't keep going at this pace and expect taxpayers to just pony up year after year. And, you know, you just shake your head. I love being on budget because I get to see the sausage being made. But it's also very distressing to see some of the things the state spends money on and prioritizes above all just essential services.
Now, one of your colleagues in the state assembly, Paul Kinitra, who was on the show coincidentally a few weeks back, was responsible for a very interesting report just within the last couple of years about what happens here in New Jersey when it comes to accommodating illegals. I mean, we're talking about $7 billion, Assemblyman, and that number just made me cringe. And again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Again, as fellow academics here, you can correct me here if I'm not really giving the facts on this show, which is rare. But one of the things that really, I think, angers me about what Trenton does is, for example, when it comes to Medicaid dollars that come from Washington. Now, yes, I think some bombastic conservatives out there, especially on social media, will say, well, you know, illegals in New Jersey receive Medicaid. That's not true. But what Trenton does in a very crafty sort of way is they take Medicaid dollars, and what they've done is they've allocated that into what's called NJ Family Care, which, again, is sort of a window dressing for allowing low-income individuals and families to have access to health care. And in New Jersey's case, obviously, they're not asking for documentation. So essentially, illegals are really, you know, like citizens who I think it's more who I feel they should go towards. Illegals benefit from Medicaid dollars and having access to healthcare because of NJ Family Care. I mean, that's costing the state hundreds of millions of dollars. So when I'm outraged about it and people call me a racist and a xenophobe, and I'm not, I would argue that if that didn't exist, or if at least it was better scrutinized or better managed only for residents and citizens, we wouldn't be in the fiscal, I think, rut that we're in. At least that's one solution I'm thinking of.
You know, you're 100% right, Fernando. And the problem is, the good thing is, the minute they call you a name, you've won. Yeah. Because that's the worst argument you can make, to start calling names, especially with something as important and as high profile as this. Now, a lot of my colleagues say, "Oh, gee, the federal government is cutting Medicaid." They are not cutting Medicaid. There are no cuts. In fact, there's been an increase. It's just who's eligible. They're weaning people off who are ineligible. Either they're citizens here or non-citizens who somehow become engaged in the Medicaid system. But for the most part, everyone is getting, who is deserving, is still on the Medicaid rolls, and that's a fact. So let's get that straightened out first of all. Again, we have to cover, if somebody goes into an emergency room, the law says they must take care of them and give them health care. So we're on the hook for those emergency room visits, and the more folks who are here illegally, the more the taxpayers are on the hook for their service. So this is what we're dealing with, and I've come to grips with it, but not everybody in the legislature has. So that's the first thing. What's the old saying? The first way to curing a problem is admitting you have one. Well, New Jersey certainly has one, and this is a big factor. And I just want to say, and not that I'm jumping gears too much here, but young people are faced with an affordability problem trying to buy a house. Young couples, it's staggering how many are still living at home even after they're married. But there was a report out of the Wharton School in Pennsylvania that says the influx of illegal aliens is having a direct impact on the price of housing in this country. So this is another thing that no one wants to bring up and no one wants to address, but it's every bit as real and damaging as you can imagine.
No, you said it perfectly, and we'll get into the affordability crisis here in New Jersey in just a moment. But just getting back to the amount of dollars out of our state budget that goes into accommodating illegals. Assemblyman, there's a legal fund set up to help illegals get legal representation when it comes to fighting deportation. So, you want to talk about kind of your nose to spite your face here. It seems like progressives and the left and activists have really gotten the ear of legislators for at least the last decade or so. And obviously, listen, we had 8 years of a governor like Phil Murphy who bent over backwards for illegals, bent over backwards to accommodate activists and legislators who felt, for example, that giving a driver's license was a good idea for illegals. And I'll even add this too. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but sure, okay, the narrative was, well, they're here and they're driving and they're taking their kids to school and they're going to work. How can we account for that? How can we keep the roads safer? See, this is what happens, okay? Because I regularly like to go shopping for car insurance because I know how expensive it is in New Jersey, one of the highest in the country. But this is what happens when insurance companies look at you. Obviously, they're going to take your information, take your social security. And again, if they verify that you're an illegal, again, a lot of companies will not provide coverage, Assemblyman. And what ends up happening is you end up on the lowest part of the echelon, for example, with something like NJ Cure, right? Which is probably like, as long as you have a pulse, like you'll get coverage. But it's the worst type of coverage for your auto insurance. The deductibles are bad. The body and the like the bodily damage. It's the deductibles are so bad that if you are here illegally and you obviously you have to insure your vehicle, you have to register and all that. The problem is that again, if you're an illegal and you get into an accident with a registered driver like myself and you and I citizens, and we have better coverage, guess what's going to happen? Their deductibles are bad. And if there's catastrophic damage or bodily harm, their insurance isn't going to cover it. So guess whose pocket's affected? It's the Assemblyman and Fernando Uribe's.
Yeah. And you know what, Fernando, this year has been exceptional as far as people's premiums going up. When people start calling my office, they're at the end of their rope for help. And the only thing I can do is really commiserate because mine went up and I have no accidents, a safe driver. I've gotten one speeding ticket 30 years ago in Ohio. And, so I'm a preferred driver. And my friends in the insurance industry say, listen, we have to spread out, the cost of this, because if you kept it to certain areas or certain drivers, it would be astronomical. So talk about unfairness, but this is the reality we're dealing with. And, these are sort of the quiet, under the radar type of, downsides of this whole system that, past administrations have covered. And it really is where I end up holding the bag. Now, let me just, make one thing very clear. We want people to come here. We want people to come here the right way. I've been to many swearing in of new citizens, and it's heartwarming. It really is something. But this chaos that we have here now, we are paying the price. We're paying the price with education costs. We're paying the price with car insurance premiums, Medicaid. We're paying the price everywhere you turn around. And certainly crime. Look, not that it's New Jersey, but the killer of Laken Riley was just convicted today of every count. So this is no joke, and this is something that, thankfully the gangplank has been pulled up at the border, and we're starting to deal with some of the fallout from it.
Sure, certainly. And again, just to get back to family care, one of my sources provided me documentation last week, and just as a reminder, after the big beautiful bill was passed last year in Congress, effective January 1st of 2027, something I'm not sure if you knew about this, but certain adults aged 19 to 64 are going to have to work, volunteer, or go to school to keep their coverage for NJ Family Care. Now, it's called, quote, community engagement, or a work requirement. Obviously, these members must also renew their coverage every 6 months instead of the normal 12 months. So, you know what? At least I'm feeling some accountability is coming to people that are going to be receiving coverage under NJ Family Care. And again, in many instances, since it's not necessary to prove documentation, many illegals are going to have to adhere to this. So that's a good thing. Now, whether or not they have to go do this and that gets them deported, I don't know, more the merrier. But I think that's an interesting dynamic that's taking effect coming up now on January 1st. So for everybody at home, stay tuned to see how that's going to affect the enrollment of NJ Family Care, because again, it's funded through the Medicaid dollars coming from Washington, Assemblyman. So we'll get back to that in a minute, but back to the affordability aspect here, and whether it's Phil Murphy, whether it's legislators in Trenton, in the Democrat Party, or the new governor, it seems like this, affordable housing obsession seems to be on the tip of everybody's tongue. But the reality is that a lot of municipalities don't have the infrastructure. A lot of municipalities don't have, I would argue, the funding or the resources available that supposedly, we want to make sure that we make more towns inclusive to affordable housing. But guess what's going to happen, Assemblyman? Again, you could correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to suffocate a lot of municipalities with these affordable housing mandates from the Mount Laurel decision. And again, with the Democrat in the governor's seat, Democrat majorities in both chambers, I mean, is there any hope on the horizon about trying to put a stop to this?
Well, we are, and we are trying to put a stop to it. And as a former mayor, I've lived and breathed this for years. And what the problem is, too, this is overdevelopment, and it's absolutely killing the suburbs. Some of the quotas that they have, there will not be a blade of grass left in any of these municipalities if they're forced to comply 100%. Now, get ready for the kicker. There are 47 municipalities that have no quota at all. And they are usually the major cities. And ironically, they have the redevelopment opportunities where they could put this housing. They have public transportation. They have the infrastructure. They have the services there. But for some reason, 47 municipalities where they could put hundreds of thousands of units and accommodate it without overwhelming them, have no quotas. Now, if this was really about affordable housing, every one of these cities and large municipalities would have a quota. And you would see younger people be able to afford to live in an urban area where many young people like to live. And my daughter went to Temple University, so she lived in Philadelphia for a while. And a lot of younger people, that's what they prefer. So it would be a win-win all around. It would help revitalize a lot of these areas and create the affordable housing that the governor says she wants. Now, on the flip side, in the suburban areas, I don't know about you, Fernando, but I pay more in property taxes than my mortgage and insurance combined. Now, if we wanted to really make housing more affordable in this state, we would do something about the insane property taxes in this state. Yet, the answer is bulldoze forest, open fields, you name it, and build more, barrack-style housing.
And it's interesting as someone up here in Hudson County. I mean, I live right on a border of Hudson and Southern Bergen County, and I can tell you that. Listen, I'm spoiled by looking at the skyline of Manhattan every single day. But when you go down towards the waterfront, obviously there's a road called Port Imperial Boulevard and River Road that can take you all the way north into Southern Bergen County. Subsequently, Fort Lee and the George Washington Bridge. And when you're driving through there, I mean, again, 10, 15 years ago, yes, there was some development, sure. But developers have just seen if there's a square footage possible, they're going to do that. You're seeing these really expensive rental buildings where rents are going for $2,500, $3,000 for a one bedroom. Sure, you're right on the water. You're looking at Manhattan every day. You might get flooded, obviously, as we're seeing with rainstorms in the last decade, but it hasn't stopped. And it just seems like, okay, well, at some point, the chickens have to come home to roost. And, I mean, I think we should really reconsider calling ourselves a garden state when we're seeing, to your point, so much green getting cut down because of the greediness, I think, of developers. And by the same token, municipalities are kind of bending over backwards to accommodate them, Assemblyman.
And you know what, Fernando, I have a great example of how disastrous this has become. In Cranberry, New Jersey, which is outside my district, I believe that's Mercer County at that point, they wanted to condemn a 170-year-old working farm, a beautiful historic farmhouse, bulldoze everything and build housing on it just to accommodate one of these insane quotas that they have. Luckily, there was such an outcry, it became a national story that they backed off. But this is what we're facing here in New Jersey. And unless we get smart about development and stop the overdevelopment, allow towns and municipalities to develop as they see fit, people in New Jersey pay the highest property taxes in the country. By all rights, they should be able to chart their own development destiny. And it would overwhelm the schools. It certainly overwhelms the utilities and the roadways. These little tiny 18th century infrastructures were not meant for this massive development. So there's a way to do this. We have a plan, and it would work to satisfy everyone. But, not everybody thinks non-politically. This is reality, but some folks look at a political advantage in every initiative they come up with. Sure. And I think that's what we see a lot of times here.
Absolutely. And to me about utilities, I mean, so much for that executive order on day one about freezing utility costs. I mean, again, these utility companies can just wipe their ass with that executive order. And it just seems like the governor is more preoccupied with suing the president, and the Justice Department is more concerned with, again, accommodating all these left-wing groups and all these nonprofits in New Jersey with signing the Immigrant Trust Directive and making it even more difficult for law enforcement to try to work with ICE and getting rid of dangerous illegals. It's not like, and again, I understand that we're fighting an uphill battle here, Assemblyman, because, listen, the reason establishment media is dying nationally and even here in New Jersey, I mean, case in point, today, NJ.com, I opened my iPad during breakfast to read the news, and, it's not a Monday morning without NJ.com, publishing some article about, there's a kid whose life has been upended because her mom, who's been here illegally for 30 years, was sent back to Mexico. And now she can't take her AP classes. And now she, her life is upended. Well, I mean, too effing bad. I mean, again, but it seems like priorities, as always in Trenton, are just ass backwards. Again, for 8 years of Phil Murphy, the budget got bigger than Chris Christie in a fitting room. And, we ended up, acquiescing. And we talked about this when we talked last week in person, when the governor gave her preliminary budget address, and she certainly took some veiled jabs at the leadership in the legislature. I mean, you could see Craig Coughlin and Nick Scutari look at each other like, did you just say that? Like, they were like, did this blank just say that out loud about us? And you could tell that maybe, again, we're talking about 6 weeks to go here, but I got a feeling that the new governor, the state Senate President Nicholas Scutari, and the Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin. Listen, I'm a big WWE fan. This might be a triple threat match that might get really fickle and ugly in these next few weeks. How do you see this panning out between the three of them?
Well, there's going to be a lot of horse trading. That much you can be guaranteed. But I just want to point out, and you had mentioned this too about freezing utility rates. I want to make it clear there is no legal mechanism to freeze a private company's prices. There's just not. It doesn't exist. And what you can do is ask the board of BPU to not agree to any rate increases, which may or may not happen. Most likely won't happen. They'll agree to something. But as far as freezing rates at the highest levels in history is just rhetoric for a campaign. So let's make that clear. I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth, and the World Cup in the mix is not helping. That is a major headache that in another year would have certainly helped keep the eyes on the prize of getting this budget straightened out. But now with that in the mix here, you have to come up with, I think I heard the number $45 million or something to offset the cost of transportation if they wanted to keep it within reason. I think $150 or $54 was the last number I heard for a trip to the stadium. So this is a major problem. I know the governor is taking.
I mean, just to be clear, I'll let you finish. I'm sorry. It did go down to $105. Not that that's any better, because a round trip ticket from New York Penn Station
right
to that ugly monstrosity there in East Rutherford called MetLife Stadium. It literally looks like a penitentiary. It's not even remotely a nice building to look at. It's $12, Assemblyman, like on a regular day. So yes, how cute of NJ Transit to be so amenable to lower it to $105. But to your point, yeah, it's still egregious. But I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, and you're right. Whether that holds the $105, because that money has got to come from somewhere. So we'll see. We're just sitting back pretty much and letting King Kong and Godzilla duke it out. But that's the biggest problem. Is dealing with that, and then the budget. And there's a lot of the COLA increase that police and fire, retired police and fire, have not gotten for years. I'm on a bill that would reinstate that. I think if we got our priorities straight, we could do it with little to no impact on the budget. But again, this is New Jersey, so there's a lot of special interests with their handouts. So we'll see where this is going to go. For what it's worth, there's not been much indication on a direction in either house in the legislature or the governor's office. Everything's being kept very close to the vest. So we'll see. We have the treasurer coming in for a wrap up. They're actually the last day of hearing, and he will come in and give an update on revenue projections. Now, Fernando, keep in mind, we have a $3 billion structural deficit right now. The treasurer said $1.5 billion. Yeah, it depends on how you calculate it. But if those revenues come in lower than projected, that grows. That structural deficit, which means simply you're spending more than you're taking in. And it just makes it worse and worse. It makes a terrible situation that much worse. So, aside from that, everything's great. But
sure.
We're really, struggling here to find a way out here. And, we have there's plenty of places to cut if you have the political will to do it. I'll leave it at that.
I mean, certainly the World Cup disaster is a byproduct of obviously the Murphy administration. I mean, we all know that Governor Murphy used the COVID dollars coming from Washington to basically bribe FIFA, which is the governing body of football on the planet, to come to New Jersey and to make sure that the World Cup final is in New Jersey, not a beautiful stadium like Arlington, Texas, where my Cowboys play, or SoFi in, Inglewood, California, where the Rams and Chargers play. But here in that penitentiary looking building over there in East Rutherford. And what ended up happening is, now, it never ceases to amaze me, even during a transition meeting, that it didn't occur to somebody to be like, hey, by the way, the World Cup is coming later this summer. What's going to go on? Oh, we can't park there. Oh, we want everyone to just take mass transit. Again, Assemblyman, I'm a big football fan. When I say football, I mean, I talk about because it's the global game. I mean, when we talk about Europeans coming to visit, people from South America and Asia, you know, people that either watch their national teams or club teams. I
Mhm.
mean, people walk to these buildings. Okay. I'm a big Real Madrid fan. You know, the stadium in Bernabeu is right in the middle of Madrid. People take the subway, they walk up and they walk to the building. Okay. It's not like, you know, people, I think a lot of Europeans are under this false impression like, oh, well, it's in Penn Station. Oh, we can just walk. No, you can't walk from Penn Station to, you know, you can't walk on Route 3. You know, there was a journalist from NJ Events Media that actually did not a parody skit, but like an actual video of like it's impossible to do that. So you can't park at MetLife. You can only take mass transit. They're really encouraging people to take buses from the Port Authority or New York Penn Station.
Mhm.
I mean, it sounds like a potential disaster in the making. And again, I'd like to see, you know, New Jersey represented well. I don't want to see any catastrophes. But part of me is like, maybe we need a disaster to see some accountability finally with New Jersey Transit, with what goes on in this state when it
Yeah.
comes to, you know, sporting events. Listen, back in 2014, if people forget that the Super Bowl was a mass transit disaster, getting to and out of MetLife Stadium during
Yeah.
that Super Bowl. In 2019, during WrestleMania 35, it was an outright disaster where it was on a Sunday, and guess what? Trains didn't run after 6 o'clock. So there's a bottleneck of thousands of people at MetLife leaving WrestleMania. And again, it's like year after year, it seems like New Jersey Transit continues to drop the ball. And I think this might be a test for the governor early on, where never mind the budget dollars you just mentioned, but I think trying to fix what potentially could be a mass transit disaster and the optic about how
Mhm.
dysfunctional New Jersey is. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. And, you know, coincidentally, we have Chris Kalari, who's the president of New Jersey Transit, coming into a budget hearing next Monday. And I know Chris a long time. He's a smart guy, very capable. He's, you know, been involved with DOT and transportation for decades and really knows his stuff. So I'm looking forward to it just for the information value. And here, if he has any embryonic plans to be able to deal with this impending chaos we're seeing here. But you know, I'll know more after next Monday on how far they've gotten with a solution to this. But you've pretty well laid it out, and that's where we stand now, with a lot more questions than we have on a real secure plan.
Now, obviously, the budget is voted on. Certainly, Democrats have big majorities in both chambers, bigger
Mhm.
majorities since last November. And I'm with you. I'm also an eternal optimist. I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan. Believe me, nobody gets to be a bigger optimist than me. But Assemblyman, I gotta tell you, you know, last year after November, you know, I had David Wildstein on, the editor of the New Jersey Globe on. I had Brent Johnson
Mhm.
on from NJ Events Media. I also had Micah Rasmussen, the director of the Rebovik Institute at Writer. You know, three people that are as good as anybody in this state
Mhm.
at breaking down the political climate and politics here in New Jersey. And, you know, I said it on the record, and I'll kind of stick to it. I mean, I was really deflated last November. I thought going after, you know, coming out of Labor Day, that's when New Jersey start paying attention to races at all levels. I felt that Jack Cherry had a good chance to
Yeah.
squeak out a 2 or 3 point win. And what ended up happening, you know, right around Columbus Day, Yom Kippur or Columbus Day, give or take, you know, you had the federal government shutdown. You had
Mhm.
Democrats weaponizing SNAP, and oh my God, the attack on poor people and
Yeah.
people of color and women, and you know, if they can even identify what a woman was. And it really just galvanized the Democrat base in New Jersey to where what was supposed to be, you know, a 2 or 3 point win by either person
Mhm.
turned out to be like a 13 point win by Mikey Sherrill. And, you know, obviously she had coattails. Democrats gained seats in the assembly.
Yeah.
The majorities got bigger. You know, try to talk me off the ledge here. I mean, Republicans, it's a dark time for Republicans in New Jersey now. Even when I had, you know, the new chair, Christine Hanlon on, and I love her. She's a great lady. She's got a tough job ahead of her. But
Definitely.
I mean, talk me off the ledge here. I mean, if you're a
Sure.
conservative and a Republican, is there any bright light at the end of the tunnel right now?
Yes, there is. I'll tell you my thoughts on it. This was not a New Jersey loss. This was a regional loss. You saw what happened in Virginia, certainly New York City. So the stars aligned, and to their credit, they played it right. I know they sent 60,000 or so texts into Monmouth County and Ocean County. Hey, Republicans want to take away your food stamps, which was completely untrue. So you got a lot of folks who don't normally come out, scared into coming out. So that's number one. Number two, even though we lost a few seats, we have a tremendous nucleus in the Republican Assembly and the Senate too, but the Senate wasn't up. Right now, we have some real incredible talent. I mean, Dawn Fantasia up in Sussex County, Mike and Ganamort, Paul Kinitra, Alex Sawicki, my colleague, Vicki Flynn. We really have some solid people who are very outspoken. We have, really strong, workable ideas. So everything's in place here. We just have to grow our numbers. Now, look at the Supreme Court. We had that decision about gerrymandering, and thank God you finally can't do this sort of thing based on race. We've been trying since Martin Luther King to get away from using race for anything except acceptability. And here we are designing and creating voting districts based solely on race. So with that's going to hurt that sort of monkeying around. So let's get that straight. Now, the other thing too is to encourage people to come out. I've had a lot of people say that, my vote doesn't count, it's all rigged and all that kind of thing. So we have to improve turnout. That's another thing. And I think we can do it too with voter ID. We have a strong bill, several strong bills that will require voter ID. Certainly cleaning off the voter rolls. I don't know if you saw in North Carolina recently, they found 34,000 deceased people on their voter rolls. And in fairness, the last thing people are thinking about when a loved one passes away is, I have to call and let them know that so-and-so has to be taken off the rolls. So if we can do those things, that would go a long way to tightening up our elections. So I think there are solutions out there. And I think the mood of the country, you saw those polls that said something like 82%, including 71% of Democrats approve of voter ID. So this is something that we can really get done, I think, with a few more seats for our side anyway.
And what's interesting about gerrymandering, again, educate me on this, I could be wrong, but when I look at voter turnout and I look at voter representation in New Jersey, now, yes, for everyone who's not familiar at home, New Jersey has 12 congressional districts. 9 of the 12 districts are occupied by Democrats and 3 are by Republicans. Representatives Jeff Van Drew, Tom Kean Jr., and Chris Smith. Obviously, the other 9 are occupied by Democrats. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting, though, is when you look at the numbers, though, Assemblyman, if you really gerrymandered New Jersey correctly, I would argue, again, because of the registration advantages, Democrats still have an advantage over Republicans. But I would argue that if we gerrymandered New Jersey correctly, it would probably be like 7-5 Democrats, if anything, or maybe an even 6-6. But unfortunately, Democrats have been able to manipulate a map for years when it comes to the redistricting committees, right, after the census and everything. And also, too, let's be fair, illegals count towards the census. There's never been this concerted effort to not count illegals. And again, I think that's what Democrats have benefited from, not just in New Jersey, but around the country, that, congressional districts. I don't recall the exact Supreme Court decision, but it allows for illegals to be counted in the census. Now, if that was not the case and we only counted American citizens, I think Democrats across the country would shit their pants. And B, I think we would get a much fairer map. But here in New Jersey, it doesn't seem like there's any interest in being fair. I know Governor Sherrill obviously is trying to weaponize the outrage by Democrats across the country about what's going on during this midterm cycle. We saw what the Virginia Supreme Court ruled. We've seen, and rightfully so, again, I'm not an attorney, but I can tell you, just reading the case law, you don't have to be an attorney to understand this. What the United States Supreme Court ruled on gerrymandering in that case down in Louisiana, I believe,
Yeah.
that was the correct call. It's not about being conservative or liberal or progressive. That was the right call. And it just seems like Democrats and progressives are up in arms over something like, they don't want you to be fixated on race, but they want you to be fixated on race.
Yes. And Fernando, it's interesting how crazy this gets with the gerrymandering. There's a district in North Carolina that has several miles, only a few feet wide. It's a roadway that no one lives along, like a state highway.
Yep.
And they have that in there as part of a district just to connect two areas that they wanted in one district. So this is the kind of ridiculous sort of posturing and gerrymandering that goes on. And look at those 6 states in New England. They have 21 congressional seats, no Republicans, even though they have between 42 and 49% registered Republicans in those states. So this has been going on for years. The Supreme Court is finally putting a stop to it. And this is all, going to benefit everybody. And just one more thing I want to say about voter ID. And this is, you hear a lot about how it disenfranchises minority groups. Well, when they started with voter ID in North Carolina, minority participation skyrocketed. So these are all bogus claims and bogus, downsides that just don't exist.
No, it really is. And again, it's an issue that the far left and Democrats at the national level have weaponized to stoke fear and outrage and just somehow think, well, poor people can't get IDs, which is nonsense. And again, I'll give you an example here in New Jersey, where again, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but here in New Jersey, folks, for everyone at home, if you operate a motor vehicle, your license is renewed every 4 years, and it is $24. Okay. Now, if you do not operate a motor vehicle, but you do have an ID, not a real ID, but let's say you get a real a regular ID that doesn't allow you to operate a motor vehicle, that's $20. So essentially, for drivers, for motorists like you and I, Assemblyman, so it's $24 every 4 years. So essentially, if you took $1 a month and put it under your mattress for 24 consecutive months, and you put that under your mattress, when you have to go renew your license, guess what? There's the cost of renewing your driver's license. And also, if you want to renew your other, non-motor vehicle ID, that's $20. So that's basically $1 for 20 consecutive months. So the idea that, Democrats and progressives and the left say, well, that's just a burden. Folks, if you can't afford $24 in 4 years, you got bigger problems than voting. I hate to break it to you.
Absolutely. And you know what, Fernando, you need photo ID to get food stamps and SNAP benefits.
Exactly.
And many government programs. So it's ridiculous. Remember the funny story about shoveling snow in New York City? You needed, several forms of ID to be hired as a snow shoveler in New York City. So it's all bogus. It just doesn't exist.
No, it really, really is. Now, getting back to the budget, I really want to sort of pick your brain about this because certainly the Speaker of the Assembly, we could almost make the case that his pet project, his baby, is I think NJ Care, right? I'm sorry, not NJ Care. I think it's Care New Jersey. Stay NJ, excuse me. And that is really, to some extent, it's become a valuable program for seniors.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, I think when we look at the ROI, though, Assemblyman, I don't think it's materialized the way the Assembly Speaker would have liked. And if you want to look at what the governor might take a scalpel to and just extract, you want to talk about removing an organ, never mind cutting the skin. It may just be removing a whole organ in the process. It seems like the Assembly Speaker's project is in jeopardy of not getting funded in this budget. That could cause some serious friction between, two Democrats. And I think that are very adamant about their beliefs about what the budget should be. What are you hearing in the halls of Trenton about, could this be a collision course of some kind?
Yeah, in fact, we're starting to hear from constituents, please don't cut this program. Now, the governor is talking about having the limit for how much you can make from $500,000 to $250,000, and then cutting back on the actual benefit. to, I believe, $4,100 a year or $4,000 a year, whatever they have decided on. So that's being floated, sort of a trial balloon for that particular program. So it remains to be seen. I don't know if the pressure will become too much where they'll have to look elsewhere, but that's a very real possibility. And I know the speaker was very, very adamant about that program and felt strongly about it, as many of us do. Anything that would give the taxpayers a fighting chance to deal with these property taxes that they're saddled with. Certainly we're going to back, and we're going to do everything we can to protect it. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a non-starter, as they say, to include that in any potential cuts.
Folks, it's 7 o'clock right on the dot here on Real Talk here on Jersey First TV. My guest this evening is the distinguished assemblyman out of the 13th Legislative District, my good friend Gerard Scharfenberger, here tonight on the show. Folks, we'll be wrapping up shortly with the assemblyman here on Real Talk. Assemblyman, let me ask you this, though, because it would seem that, as I mentioned before, during the preliminary budget address, that the governor took some not so subtle jabs at the Senate president and the Assembly Speaker when it comes to, pet projects. And we know that, it seems like there's a lot of pork that gets filled in last minute into the state budgets. And I get it that some legislators benefit from some of these projects, which helps their legislative district when it comes to infrastructure, constituents. I get all that stuff, but we all know that, again, if you really want to save some money, number one, you could audit New Jersey Transit, God forbid. You could audit the Turnpike and Parkway Authority, God forbid. But it would seem that, Cheryl was really adamant in making it clear to Scutari and Coughlin collectively, like, hey, you might have gotten away with this bullshit for a lot of years under different governors. They might not work with me. And again, when you look at Cheryl, you look at the obvious. You look at, some of these positions she's taken. She might see herself as a national name in 2028 for a possible vice presidential slot or even running for president. I think it's fair to say that Woodrow Wilson, the only New Jerseyan to ever be elected to the presidency, I think he's safe in his grave to know that he'll be the only New Jerseyan being elected. But that's not going to stop Mikey Cheryl from trying to nationalize what she's doing here, and maybe sticking it to the Assembly Speaker and the Senate President might be a good way to elevate her stock politically. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, sure. There's always some sort of jockeying being done with, politics and people's perceived futures. But certainly you have to govern here in New Jersey. So you can't afford to play too many games, and still get things accomplished here. They play hardball here in New Jersey, and they certainly have to treat New Jersey, that New Jersey comes first, and duke it out from there. But they're not going to care about anybody's future ambitions beyond the Delaware River, that's for sure. And, keep in mind, Fernando, what works in New Jersey, the rhetoric that's spewed here, will not sell in many parts of the country. So they have to be careful, anyone who has ambitions beyond a state office, to really watch what they're proposing here, because that will follow you like a ball and chain. So this is something that can't be taken for granted.
Now, you mentioned next week you have the director of NJ Transit coming to a hearing in Trenton. Certainly, is that something that the Budget Committee would like to try to do in the next few weeks here? Not just New Jersey Transit, but other agencies that, quite frankly, I think deserve a little bit of the microscope. I mean, again, when we look at the state budget, we look at a lot of nonprofits that benefit from grants, whether it's, far left progressive organizations that cater to, groups like Our State Equality, or organizations like Make the Road New Jersey. And, all these organizations that are, whether it's accommodating, trans people and all that bullshit, and or accommodating illegals. I mean, is there any real mechanism to try to maybe put a stop to that, or maybe to shave the numbers down about what these organizations ultimately will get in the state budget?
Well, sure. You can come in and say there's a 5% across the board cut, just for an example. So you can do that. And that's part of the part of the reason that we go through this ritual of budget hearings, because you get to grill the departments, make sure that what they're asking for is legitimate and viable, and that's the joust. So you have to try and determine what they need to minimally run a viable office and viable department, I should say, and you go from there. And that's where the disagreement comes in. What a department head may or a commissioner may feel is necessary may not be what we feel is necessary in the end. So that's where this comes in, and hopefully you can find a happy medium and come up with a sound budget. But I'll tell you flat out, if there's a structural deficit, that's a deal breaker for me. That's something I just can't vote yes for something that we're already spending more than we're taking in. We have to live within our means.
Now, again, your fellow legislators in the 13th Legislative District, State Senator O'Scanlan, Assemblywoman Flynn, shout out to Vicky, who always good to talk with her last week in Perth Amboy. And I want to ask, because obviously you're in Monmouth County, and I sort of want to pick your brain about this. 6 years later, Assemblyman, after the referendum passed that November in 2020 to legalize recreational marijuana and subsequently tax it, the creation of the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, the dissemination of licenses to dispensaries. Wasn't there a talk once about, well, if we legalize it, we can tax it, and look what we can do with all this revenue from all the potheads in New Jersey that get to go to dispensaries and get high regularly. 6 years later, I mean, listen, again, I walk down some blocks in my town, and I mean, I hate the stink of weed. I've never smoked weed, don't care to, never will. Some people think I should, maybe to lighten up, but 6 years later, where has that talk gone to about revenues? And it should have helped, fill in some gaps and voids in the budget. That hasn't happened, I think, right?
No, well, you know what, Fernando, timing is everything in life, right? The Cannabis Commission is coming in a week from Wednesday.
Good.
So I will get the answers to all of this. And, great minds do think alike. There are a lot of the same questions I'm going to be asking about all this perceived wealth of revenue that we're going to be getting from this, just to see really how viable it is, and if it is coming through the way they had hoped it does. So with all of the problems going on with municipal budgets and school budgets, and I don't know how much of that revenue is filtering down to some of the areas that are really needed. So we'll see, but it's one of the questions top on my list to ask. So hopefully we'll have some answers next time I visit.
No, I appreciate that. And let me ask you this, you're a numbers guy like myself, just for our audience at home that maybe isn't familiar with the methodology. And, it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, not just during budget season, but really during election season. And that's the school funding formula in the most succinct way possible for our audience. I mean, I have a very intelligent audience, but again, in just the most succinct way possible, can you really help explain what goes into factoring in the school funding formula, and why is it such a polarizing topic, not just obviously during budget season, but obviously, boards of ed have to ratify their school budgets. We're seeing, for example, nearby, south of me in Jersey City, the Jersey City Board of Ed just passed preliminarily a $1.2 billion budget where they're still not telling Jersey City residents and parents what the tax increase is going to be. So, again, when it comes to the school funding formula, how is it calculated? And quite frankly, why is it still such a polarizing issue? Even in 2026,
it's the ultimate class warfare issue here, and it's a very, very complicated formula. No one can really figure it out, but in general, the way it works is if the value of the property values determine a lot of how much the state feels you can raise taxes to fund education. There is a cap for a lot of towns, a lot of municipalities, on how much aid they can get from the state, which is another problem. Vicky and I have a bill that would remove that cap, so at least a lot of municipalities who are getting hurt year after year could at least get additional funding. And then there are some school districts that are awash in money. The state published a list of the top 10 receiving municipalities, and the top 10 get $4.4 billion in state aid, which is 7% of the entire state budget, not the school part of the budget, but the entire state budget. So to me, that's problematic. We've had school districts in our district that have gotten cuts, and they are told, well, you lost student population. Well, I'll give you an example. Newark lost 890 students and ended up getting over $50 million additional. So much for that. That's clearly not across the board. So we want every school district to get adequate funding. But when you have such a disparity and very frankly, a lack of academic success to show for some of that funding, that's a real problem. And we really have to get to the bottom of it, get a sound funding formula in place that's fair to everybody, not just a certain few while others are struggling and looking under sofa cushions for coins to close budget gaps that you see year after year.
I mean, and we're seeing kids in Newark can barely read, but somehow somebody thought of the idea that maybe kids in Newark as young as 16 should be voting in municipal elections. I mean, who would have thought about that level of stupidity?
Yeah.
And I think it cost like $1 million or something. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think less than like 50 students actually voted.
Yeah, it's staggering, and it's such a ridiculous premise. We want kids to be involved. We want them to learn civics and learn the process. But when I was 16 years old, I didn't pay any taxes. I had no concept of what it's like to pay a property tax, to have to manage a budget. I had no concept of contracts and capital programs and all of the things that go into deciding a school board member, all of the things they have to deal with. It's the most bizarre concept I've ever heard, to have a 16-year-old voting on a $1.4 billion budget. It's just a head scratcher.
It really is. And again, it just shows about the priorities in Trenton sometimes where, yeah, you want to make voting more inclusive. But again, I remember when I was 16 years old, I cared about video games. I cared about watching pro wrestling. I cared about, going out with my buddies to the newsstand. And let's be honest, we're 16-year-old boys. I mean, if someone's distracting the clerk at the front desk, we're trying to check out some girly magazines. You know what I'm saying? Or something. So, I mean, I remember what 16 years old meant for me. But again, just ask backward priorities in Trenton. Let me ask you this, though, because, again, we're just about to wrap here. Folks, again, we're just about to wrap up here with a distinguished Assemblyman, Gerry Scharfenberger, here from the 13th Legislative District here on Real Talk on Jersey First TV. Now, again, it's 6 weeks to go, but realistically, it just seems like Jersey's always like a last-minute thing, and we're going to be seeing a lot of movement probably. I think it's fair to say that the governor is going to be so preoccupied with the World Cup and the potential catastrophe she wants to avoid, because again, while it wasn't her baby, as they say, it was Phil Murphy's. It's fallen in her lap, and she's going to have to account now for the shitstorm that potentially could be coming if this just isn't well organized. And whether it's, again, fans can't go to MetLife. Again, today, some preliminary dates came out for the NFL schedule for the 2026 season. And sure, Sunday, September 13th, Cowboys Nation invades MetLife when they play the Giants. And sure, 50,000 plus cars can park there in September, but they can't park during the World Cup. They want people to take mass transit. They're not going to allow, obviously, any tailgating. Maybe they're going to allow some food trucks. Who knows? It just seems like a potential disaster in the making. It almost seems like maybe the governor is going to be really preoccupied with this, where maybe the budget is going to be one of those last-minute things. And, it's almost like Democrats are going to hope that, it goes under the radar and they can try to sneak things through there. Do you foresee that at all?
It's very possible that there'll be such a morass of problems to deal with that this is just another problem that has to be dealt with and doesn't get the attention. I would certainly hope it does, but this is a wrinkle that we don't deal with ever. Maybe the Super Bowl a few years ago was somewhat the same issue, but I don't remember it being as catastrophic as this is turning out to be. So. It remains to be seen. I'm sure this is all going to come up on Monday. We have DOT coming in, we have motor vehicles, and then we have New Jersey Transit. So it's everything transportation. So a lot of these questions should come up and be addressed then. But I don't see an easy way out, and we're going to have to come up with something.
We'll definitely see. Again, folks, if you're just joining us live here tonight, again, like, comment, and share. It really helps the show grow and show your support for fearless independent journalism here with Real Talk via Jersey First TV. My guest tonight is the distinguished Assemblyman out of the 13th Legislative District, the Honorable Gerard Scharfenberger here on Real Talk. Assemblyman, we've gotten to talk to you as the academic, as the legislator. Let's do a quick lightning round of Gerard Scharfenberger, the guy, the regular Jersey guy, the dad, the guy I got to meet last week, and your beautiful kids, God bless them, certainly last week in Perth Amboy at U.S. Senate candidate Alex Don's event. So quick lightning round here, and we'll start off with sports since we're regular guys. We'll see. Favorite baseball team?
Yankees.
Okay. Favorite Yankee?
Favorite Yankee? I would say Derek Jeter. I love Aaron Judge. I think he's a classy guy. But Derek Jeter, I've met once, and just a real down to earth, real deal superstar.
Okay. Big Yankee fan as well here. All-time favorite Yankee, Donnie Baseball. Love Don Mattingly. I think for a lot of us that play Little League, the reason you wanted to be A, left-handed, and B, plays first base was Donnie Baseball. So Love him, and not too thrilled with him being the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies right now, but they're doing pretty well. They're like 9-3 since he took over, so we'll see. Favorite NFL team?
Giants, no question.
Okay. How would you grade this offseason for the Giants? A lot of expectations, new coach, some new personnel with the draft. They face the dreaded Cowboys on opening night. How do you see the Giants coming up here this season?
You know what? I love the coach. I think he is going to do great things. I mean, they're in a rebuilding year. That sounds a little cliche, but he's a great coach. I think he's just what the Giants needed. I'm pretty happy with some of the draft picks, and I think Jackson Dart is going to, if he stays healthy and stays away from the concussions, I think he's could have a really good year, and hopefully he and Harbaugh will, Coach Harbaugh will connect and lead the team to. I would love to see them make the playoffs. I just want a winning season. I'll settle for a winning season, but that's where I feel they're at and where they will be.
It should be interesting. The last three, season openers between the Cowboys and Giants haven't gone very well. The Giants are 0-3, and the games haven't even been close in the last three, season openers. So we'll find out. We'll see. It's a new season. It gives us something to look forward to in the fall for sure during the 2026 season. Basketball and hockey, Assemblyman.
Basketball. Well, I grew up a Knicks fan in Brooklyn. So still a Knicks. And hockey is kind of an interesting. I grew up a Rangers fan. My brother is one of the team doctors for the Islanders, and I'm a Devils fan. So I have to, root for the three of them. And,
sure. Favorite Knick all time?
Well, I'm going back a bit. I think Willis Reed was a great center, and a real old school gentleman and class act.
Yep.
And he was the face of the Knicks in the 60s and 70s when they won those championships. So
yeah, I mean, I wasn't alive to see that last championship. I mean, I'm predominantly a Laker fan, but being a local guy, I'll root for the Knicks too. Like to see them do it. Obviously, 1973, the last championship, and coincidentally, that was the courageous display by Willis Reed in Game 7 at the Garden, where he went 2 for 2, shot 2 buckets, but that's all the Knicks needed for motivation to beat the Lakers in Game 7 of the finals that year. So we'll see what happens during these Eastern Conference playoffs. Big Devil fan as well, Assemblyman. Love the Devils. Love going to Prudential Center. I think it's one of the best buildings to go watch anything in. And I'm one of the few Hispanics that loves watching hockey. Love it live. I don't think there's a better building to watch hockey than Prudential. The Devil fan base is loyal. We're hungry for a championship. It could be worse. We could be the Blue Skirts, right, from Broadway, who haven't won since '94, right? But we'll see. Devils new GM, looking for a new coach. We'll find out. We'll see what happens. I know your kids are young, Assemblyman, but I got to ask you, you're a guy growing up, comic book fan, DC Comics, Marvel. What do you like?
Not really. In fact, they're my grandkids. Let's make
Oh,
that
my
straight.
bad. I'm sorry. My bad. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So, I don't want people to think, gee, look at this old geezer with little kids. But no, my grandkids, growing up, I was very active. I played a lot of sports, and that was, my passion. Not voting in school district elections.
Sure.
But so that's what I really liked. And I'm a child of, of the TV era. So I love all the old classic TV shows, and I love rock music. You know, Many people are surprised. I love metal, heavy metal. I'm a Black Sabbath fan and Metallica and all that stuff. So I've seen
Well,
students of mine at these concerts, and they're like, "What are you doing here?"
well, it's interesting about music. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, loved a lot of the hair bands, the hair metal. I grew up on Poison and Bon Jovi,
Mhm.
Rat, Twisted Sister, Cinderella, you name
Yeah,
it. And obviously, we've seen, an evolution of that genre to where now, I mean, unfortunately, where I live up here in North Jersey, if I'm ever listening to terrestrial radio and I put on 104.3, Q rock, classic rock, and
yeah.
someone has the audacity to say that Bon Jovi or Nickelback is classic rock, I almost want to like drive off the road.
Yeah. No, that's a big dilemma having who to include in that bucket of classic. But
Sure. No, absolutely.
I guess you're around long enough, you become classic.
Absolutely. Now, I also want to ask you, obviously, fellow academics here, did notice your PhD in anthropology from CUNY, but you're an archaeologist, right? So, essentially, you are the living embodiment of Indiana Jones.
Somewhat. It's not as glamorous as that. I've dug up plenty of Heineken caps in addition to some interesting things. But yeah, I had a great career as an archaeologist. I taught for over 25 years at Monmouth University. So it's great. And apparently, I'm the only archaeologist to hold public office. And I
Oh,
know that because I got contacted by one of the associations who looked all
okay.
over the country. And I was the only one asking me to give a talk, run a seminar on running for office. So it is interesting.
You mentioned real quick. I mean, again, one last question because since you brought up you taught at Monmouth, it kind of like you know turn on the light bulb for me about higher education. And quite frankly, as something that higher education has been in the crosshairs for some years now. And listen, I am as devoted a Rutgers alumnus
Mhm.
as there is. I got my undergraduate degrees in New Brunswick, my graduate degrees in Newark, but even I have to be intellectually honest here. And I think it's fair to say that Rutgers should be in the crosshairs of
Mhm.
Trenton because I don't think there's been any accountability in the hundreds of millions of dollars that have gone to the state university for some years now under different governors. And I'm always worried about the bloatedness of bureaucracy in
Yeah.
higher education. Case in point, we were talking about this last week. Obviously, we're seeing King University absorbing New Jersey City University here in Hudson County to
Yeah.
where they'll become Kane Jersey City. We're seeing a lot of smaller colleges being absorbed. We saw Bloomfield College being
Mhm.
absorbed by Montclair State University. There's talks about William Patterson University being absorbed by Montclair. We've seen what Rutgers has done. Again, I think that we have seen higher ed in New Jersey, even around the country, just become too much of a business. And
Yeah.
it's become such a bloated bureaucracy. I mean, again, take Rutgers, for example, there's no need for 30 deans. There's no need for, first of all, I'm not a fan of DEI bullshit anyway, but there's no need for a dean for diversity, a dean for inclusion, and a dean for equity. I think we can consolidate all the bullshit within higher education, but it just seems like here in New Jersey and Trenton, we're not holding schools like Rutgers and other accountable. Do we see any light at the end of the tunnel where maybe in this budget or in this legislature or with this
Mhm.
governor that maybe Rutgers is held accountable?
Well, the subject did come up when they came in for higher education, and I questioned them about the football team and the expenditures there. It's no secret that the coach in Rutgers is the highest paid state employee. So what the return is on that investment, that's debatable. But I'm with you. I think the cost of a college education is outrageous. And it's really something that I think can be dealt with. And I've spoken to several presidents of universities, private and public, in New Jersey here, and I always give them my same belief that they're too top heavy with administration. And as you pointed out, and one of the questions I have, there's provosts, there's associate provosts, deans, assistant deans. I'm not quite sure what all these folks do. Maybe they have, a valid role in education, but if they don't, maybe it's something we should start taking a look at. I think we've grown so top heavy in administration in academia, where the faculty is almost the lowest cost, proportionately. So that's, I think, the first step in getting a handle on the cost of college educations. And, again, stick to education. When I went to school decades ago, certainly it was all education. There was no need to, create protesters and things like that, which I hear a lot of disturbing things from students, about, this kind of stuff inside a classroom. It has nothing to do with academics.
I mean, listen, unfortunately, academia has become a cesspool for indoctrination. Mm-hmm. We know this. I've taught in higher ed as well. Not as long as you have, Assemblyman, but I mean, I saw it with my own colleagues within the social sciences. And unfortunately, I mean, yes, we're seeing a lot of strong conservative student clubs and chapters around the country. We're seeing it at Rutgers and others. But I mean, they're grossly outnumbered by these woke, administrators, these faculty members, indoctrinating students into like just outright nonsense, whether it's woke ideologies. We saw it at Rutgers when, it seemed to be okay to harass Jewish students and faculty members in the last couple of years.
Yes.
It's sickening. It really is. But I really want to get your thoughts on that about higher ed, because I know you've taught in it for some time. And before I let you go, I want to thank you for your time, Assemblyman. You've been a wealth of information tonight. And quite frankly, I mean, talking to legislators like you gives me hope that at least in Trenton, people have some sort of fiscal common sense when we're living at a time when the left and progressive Democrats in Trenton have never met a tax that they don't love, that they feel that somehow they can tax New Jerseyans or tax us out of poverty into prosperity, which we all know is bullshit, and somehow accommodating, what they think are marginalized groups when they really should be worrying about citizens instead of, mentally ill people like trans people and illegals. And it's a shame. And I really love the voice that you represent in Trenton. So I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate your faith in my brand of independent journalism. And I'll give you the last word tonight, Assemblyman.
No, I really appreciate you having me on. This is a great forum. And one closing thing, if I may, Fernando. Sure. I want to really encourage people to vote, whether you wrongly think that your vote doesn't count, because we've had elections decided by 2 votes. So every vote does count. If you believe that, at least do it for the soldiers. Some kid at Bunker Hill or Antietam or Iwo Jima gave up his life for your right to vote. That's right. So at least come out and do it for them. And the power you have in that vote is, you can't quantify it. So I think if everybody comes out to vote who really cares about the state and wants to make a change, you'll see it happen very quickly. If we can, get some numbers, improve our numbers and get our initiatives through, you will see a different state.
Folks, he's Assemblyman Gerry Scharfenberger out of the 13th Legislative District, our guest tonight here on Real Talk. Assemblyman, happy Father's Day in advance to you coming up in June. And keep giving them hell in Trenton, and keep standing up for taxpayers. We're grateful for you. I know I am, and we appreciate you coming on here on Jersey First TV. Again, have a great Memorial Day weekend coming up. Again, keep fighting in Trenton, and we'll talk to you soon here on Jersey.
Will do, Fernando. Thank you.
Take care. Folks, good stuff there with State Assemblyman Gerry Scharfenberger out of the 13th Legislative District, our guest tonight here on Real Talk. Folks, it takes a few seconds. Like, comment, and share tonight's episode here on the program, and it really helps the show grow, and it shows your support for fearless independent journalism, not the Mickey Mouse journalists that think they're independent journalism. No, folks, not the imitators, the originators here, coming to you from Jersey First TV. Folks, it is 7:30 on the East Coast here tonight, live and in living color here. Folks, again, like, comment, and share. We appreciate your support here on Jersey First TV. And, of course, a great conversation with Assemblyman Gerry Scharfenberger out of the 13th Legislative District tonight If you missed any part of the broadcast, don't sweat it. Like, comment, and share. And again, it shows your support for Real Talk here on Jersey First TV. Folks, still a lot more to go here on the program. As you know, it's time for final thoughts. And folks, I talk about it all the time here on this program. There is a plethora of bad actors here in New Jersey. Whether it's in academia, we see it with Joe Amaditis, the resident beta male over there at Woke State University in Montclair. Obviously, a lot of useless activists, blowhards, if you really want to be specific. Bob Medina, his useless wife, Patty Medina. Other activists like Nettie Morrissey from Make the Road New Jersey. Antoinette Miles from the New Jersey Working Families Party. Hattie Rosenstein. I mean, again, these are all people who are just bad actors in New Jersey, who will tell you that they have your best interest in mind, and they don't, not in the least. Or propagandists that masquerade as journalists, the usual types, Max Pizarro, David Cruz, Matt Freeman when he doesn't have his face, stuffed in a bong, getting high at all hours of the day, Or charisma vacuums like Chucky, Charles Style from roughjersey.com, right? Or elected officials that, quite frankly, do not have your best interest in mind. And take your pick, folks. We have U.S. Representative LaMonica MacGyver, who's too busy fighting ICE agents than really representing those in her district. Or assembly people, like really useless assembly people in Trenton, like Katie Brennan and Ravi Bala, who are more concerned with, virtue signaling and getting clicks and views on their social media than actually doing real work in Trenton. Okay. But when I think of really useless government officials, elected officials, folks, who comes to mind? And if you're here, and if you live in Hudson County, I mean, folks, this is a dead giveaway. It's people like Anthony Veneri, the commissioner of the Department of Public Works nearby in North Bergen, New Jersey. Okay. And folks, I'll be very honest with you. I don't like this guy. I think he's a douchebag, to be very honest. And it's a family program, so I want to try to keep it as clean as possible. But this is an entitled, arrogant douchebag. And I know some of you might think, wow, the pot calling the kettle black, Fernando Uribe calling someone arrogant and smug. Yeah, folks, but the difference is I have a lot to be smug and arrogant about. But folks, what's disappointing about people like Anthony Veneri is that they think that they're actually serving their constituents, and they're not. Okay? I can tell you from firsthand experience, as a property owner in North Bergen, I can tell you, I sometimes wonder, what are the streets looking like lately? But meanwhile, this guy has the audacity to go on social media and publish things like this. And this has to make you laugh, folks, because when I look at the streets in North Bergen, I mean, I'll let you take a look at it right here. Hold on a second.
Hi, Anthony Veneri, DPW Commissioner, Township of North Bergen. On behalf of Mayor Sacco, Commissioners.
Yes, hi, I'm Anthony Veneri. I mean, folks, that voice will just it'll drive you to drink. But watch as he's walking through some of these streets here. You'll make you laugh.
Cabrera, Pascual, Rodriguez, and myself want to give a shout out to the Department of Public Works in North Bergen for doing a fantastic job.
When is the DPW doing a fantastic job? When? During the snowstorm? When it's raining? And somehow you and the parking authority, the geniuses over there on Bergen Turnpike, decide to issue tickets for street sweeping in the pouring rain? Folks, don't take my word for it. I've had news sites like HUTPost and others publish my videos. When I'm watching DPW send a street sweeper, y tú sabes que eso agua sucia, eso no agua limpia, and all they're doing is just kicking up dirt and dust. But during a rainstorm, that's when it's rich. Because during a rainstorm, as it's pouring, somehow this genius here and the geniuses at the parking authority, who are just as useless as Anthony Veneri, let's be honest. Okay. I mean, I cringe at thinking of what the collective IQ is at the parking authority. But this is a guy Well, again, folks, you would think that if you're going to brag about the streets in North Bergen, pick a better street. Okay, this thing has more cracks than, I don't know. Like, I mean, listen, folks, it has more cracks than the Giant defense. Okay, but let's continue here.
Superintendent, assistant superintendents, the supervisors, and all the laborers that work tirelessly with different shifts throughout the weekend, plowing our streets and salting our streets, making sure everybody gets out safely while schools are clean. Now, when your opponents are praising you, you're doing something right. It means administration's moving North Bergen forward. I want to thank.
What opponents are praising you, Anthony? Like, you are one of the laziest people I've ever seen. I mean, really? Like, what is there to praise about the streets in North Bergen? Folks, there's potholes everywhere. Sure, Bergen Line is fine. But folks, let me just give you a sneak peek about what it's like to walk the streets in North Bergen. Okay? Here's some exclusive footage of people, or what it's like to walk in North Bergen with the amount of potholes and cracks on the sidewalk and the cracks on the streets. Folks, this is what it's like to walk in North Bergen on the streets under the supervision of this guy. See that hobbling? Like, folks, that's what it looks like. So when people are walking in North Bergen, like on the streets, that's what it looks like, because you have to avoid the potholes. You have to avoid the cracks on the sidewalk. And somehow this is something to be praised. Somehow this is a good job DPW is doing. En qué mundo? Like, in what world are you living in that people buy this bullshit? I'm a property owner. I pay taxes. What are my taxes going towards in North Bergen? What? To fill up Anthony's belly when he goes out to eat 6 times a week? I mean, please explain this to me. Okay, but this is what it's like, whether it's my parents, whether it's me, whether it's property owners in North Bergen. When we're walking down the streets in North Bergen, this is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. That's what it is. I'm not even kidding. That's what it's like walking in North Bergen. Yeah. Again, folks, that's what it's like in North Bergen. Okay? So the reason I bring this up is because obviously last week, and a special thank you to my good friend David Wallstein, the editor of the New Jersey Globe, he was really the first to publish this exclusive story, to where the current mayor, Nicholas Sacco, and I want to be nice to Nick. He's a fellow Cowboys fan. I don't want to be too mean to Nick Sacco, but let me just give you the rundown of why this story is so compelling, right? As reported by the New Jersey Globe, Sacco is mulling early retirement in North Bergen and is expected to back Hugo Cabrera as his successor. Okay? Now, the longtime Hudson official reportedly wants his son to be a commissioner. Early indications is that Veneri won't get support for mayor. No, de verdad. Anthony Veneri won't get support for mayor. No me diga. Really? No one has confidence in Anthony Veneri? Oye, like, you know, so, oh my God. Like, perish the thought. You mean that people are getting wind of the fact that Anthony Veneri no sirve para nada? Whoa, my God. Whoa. That's news to me. No, it's not. It's not news. Todo mundo sabe que Anthony Veneri no sirve para nada. Eso no sirve para nada. Okay? And I don't have a problem saying it. Okay? Of course he won't get support for mayor. Who would trust this lazy bastard? Right? But let's continue. North Bergen Mayor Nicholas Sacco has quietly informed close political allies that he's considering resigning early next year to put his preferred succession plan in place ahead of the May 2027 nonpartisan municipal election, according to the New Jersey Globe. Now, Sacco's tentative plan is to back Commissioner Hugo Cabrera for mayor and install his son, Nicholas Sacco Jr., an elementary school principal in North Bergen and fellow pro wrestling fan, as his replacement to township commissioner. Another possibility the New Jersey Globe has learned is that Sacco would step down as mayor, but serve the remainder of his term as commissioner. Under that scenario, Sacco Jr. would be a candidate for an open seat next year. Now, Sacco's spokesman, Phil Nabinski, pointed to the mayor's record during more than 40 years in public office, including, quote, making the community safer, stronger, and more affordable. I don't know about that, Phil. I know you got to I know you're cashing checks and you have to put the best foot forward, but let's be honest, folks, about who the best mayor is in Hudson County, and that's not even close. It's nearby in Union City, and that's my mayor, Brian Stack. And after redistricting, when state Senate seats were being realigned, Nick Sacco saw the writing on the wall. And while he was the state senator in what used to be the old 32nd Legislative District, once North Bergen and Guttenberg and Western were pushed into the new 33rd Legislative District in 2023, well, guess what happened? Nick Sacco saw the writing on the wall and decided not to challenge an attempt to primary Brian Stack, because we all know what would have happened. He would have gotten smoked. Now, we all know the backroom dealings about, well, naming an assembly person here who will be the next HCDO chair, the next chair of the Hudson County Democrat Organization. We all know the stories. We've heard him. Okay. Now, again, Nick Sacco has served in North Bergen. I want to be as nice as possible here to him. Okay. But let's be fair too, though, folks. Nick Sacco and his leadership or lack thereof has been responsible for a lot of mean-spirited attacks against Mayor and State Senator Brian Stack. Let's not get it twisted here. Let's not rewrite history about whether or not to paint Nick Sacco in a favorable light, because let's be honest, we all know he has not been very gracious to Brian Stack at all. And that's calling balls and strikes fairly, folks. And I know people at City Hall in North Bergen don't like hearing that. The low IQ employees at the parking authority don't like hearing that. But the fact is that Nick Sacco has not been nice to Union City. He has not been nice to Mayor Stack and his Board of Commissioners over the years. We all know this. So if he's choosing to retire, great. Retire gracefully, and we'll see what the succession plan will be. Now, rumors are circulating that Hugo Cabrera and Brian Stack have been chummy lately. They've been warm to each other. But again, folks, we're talking about a year out from a municipal election. A lot can change. And the reason that this is significant, of course, is what Sacco will likely seek to avoid is a special November 2026 election for a commissioner seat. That means he would not leave a seat until at least September, when a replacement could be appointed without the encumbrance of a voter involvement. The move could also eliminate infighting within the Sacco organization between Cabrera and another township commissioner, Anthony Veneri, the former chair of the HCDO and county commissioner, who has been angling for the mayor's post for some years. Now, North Bergen has a population of over 63,000 voters, roughly 71% of whom are Hispanic. And some think Sacco is going to be the last white mayor in the township of North Bergen. Now, Cabrera, the North Bergen School Board Secretary, has served as commissioner since 1999. Now, again, I don't have an issue with Hugo Cabrera. I think he's a good public servant. Okay. Tends to lean conservative, so I don't really have a bad word to say about Hugo at this present time. But if North Bergen was smart, you would make sure that Hugo Cabrera is the next mayor and not Anthony Veneri. I mean, we want someone competent, for God's sakes. Right? Now, also, what makes the story interesting is Assemblyman Larry Weinstein, a Democrat out of North Bergen in the 33rd Legislative District, is a close political ally of Union City Mayor and State Senator Brian Stack. He is also considering a possible candidacy for mayor. He's challenged Sacco in 2015, 2019, and in 2023, where the losses have been less and less each time he's run. So he's been making a dent in North Bergen, folks. And we saw him making a dent during the last legislative primaries, where he, along with Assemblyman Gabe Rodriguez, last year, were able to win an overwhelming victory in the 33rd Legislative District primary against slumlord Tony Hector and that walking mummy, Frank Alonso, right? Now, it remains to be seen whether or not the assemblyman will want to remain that assembly seat, or if he's really determined to run for mayor next year. Sources tell Real Talk that he is determined to run for mayor next year. Now, whether or not he'll get the blessings and the backing of State Senator Brian Stack, that remains to be seen, folks. Again, we're talking about a year out from this municipal election. A lot can change. Sure, Hugo Cabrera showed up at the last Brian Stack event at the Great Cliff in Moonachie, New Jersey. A lot can change, folks, in Hudson County politics. So we'll see if that camaraderie or rapport can remain intact between Commissioner Cabrera, who's soon to be perhaps the next mayor in North Bergen, and the current Union City mayor, who's going to be cruising to a re-election tomorrow. here in Union City by an overwhelming margin, right? Like 99.9% of the vote. So we'll see what happens a year out. But don't underestimate how this story merits a lot of consideration and examination in the coming months. We'll see what choices Larry Weinstein has to make, as well as Hugo Cabrera, and quite frankly, what choices Mayor and State Senator Brian Stecker is going to make, if any, or whether he sits it out and doesn't choose to endorse anybody. And he lets the process play itself out. We'll find out in the coming months. But I can tell you, folks, as I said before, I mean, let's be very honest, when it comes to, who's not going to be mayor in the township of North Bergen, folks, you can take it to the bank. It's not going to be this guy. And why would you want this guy as mayor? Okay? The streets in North Bergen are a disaster. Okay? So when I hear that, maybe people don't have the competence in that area, why would you? When you look at the streets, it's full of potholes. And when people are walking in North Bergen, this is what happens. And I feel bad for my parents and other people. Again, my parents are still healthy. They're still very agile, but all it takes is one bad walking through the street when you're hobbling because the street's full of potholes and cracks. All it takes is one bad, step and te jodiste. Well, folks, you can thank Anthony Verneri for that. So yeah, sure, Bergen Line, but folks, you ever driven on Tunnel? You ever driven? That's a county road per se. Well, federal road. You ever driven like in between Kennedy Boulevard and Tunnel? You ever driven between Kennedy and Bergen Line, like the avenues? Eso es basura. Esa calle no sirve para nada. La calle no sirve para nada como Anthony Verneri no sirve para nada. But what else is new, folks, in North Bergen politics? And speaking about useless, que no sirve para nada, let's talk about the next person that potentially could get elected to office, and that's Ron Batista, another useless progressive, folks, in Hudson County, running for a commissioner seat in Hoboken. Again, a special thank you to John Hines, fellow member of the Pinnacle here in Hudson County, fellow Rutgers alumnus, and the editor of the Hudson County View for his reporting on this story. Let me just take a little bit here. As Streets PAC NJ has endorsed Ron Batista for Hudson County Commission. You're probably wondering, why is that significant? Folks, that's the same annoying bike lobby group, right, that would, if it was up to them, they'd eliminate all the parking on Boulevard East in Weehawken, West New York, and in Guttenberg to make sure there's enough bike lanes along Boulevard East. Esa basura. Like who believes this bullshit? But again, leave it to one of these virtue signaling activist groups to endorse a virtue signaling activist like Ron Batista. Now, again, they said in a statement last week, according to, you want to talk about useless. How about Kevin Bing, folks, in Jersey City? When I learned that he is executive director of this group, I said, this is perfect. It takes one douchebag to know another, right? Quote, Ron Batista has been in the trenches fighting for safe, open streets and increased access to bike lanes and mass transit for over a decade. Our endorsement of his candidacy reflects the urgency of this moment because Hudson County still has a lot of work to do to achieve Vision Zero streets. This work starts with expanding bus rapid transit options on Kennedy Boulevard while expanding our countrywide bike lane network to ensure more drivers, bikers, and pedestrians are using safe and uncongested roads. We know that Ron will deliver because he's been organizing with us for over a decade on these exact quality of life issues. Now, Batista is one of 9 consensus picks among the Hudson County Democrats, including the HCDO chair, Craig Guy, who is also the county executive, along with Hoboken Mayor Emily Jabor and Jersey City Mayor James Solomon. However, Batista is not running under the HCDO banner, but instead going with the, quote, Working Families Democrat, a.k.a. useless woke fools that never took an economics course and passed it, never took a biology course and passed it, and never took a civics course and passed it. But that's what the Working Families genre perpetuates, right? So whether you're 8 or 80, our streets are for you. We must ensure that these streets are safe and functional. I've organized for over a decade with Kevin and street safety advocates in the service of this idea, delivering more bike lanes, and traffic safety infrastructures to both Hoboken and Jersey City. Blah, blah, blah. Folks, some of these expectations are they're not attainable. But when it comes to unrealistic expectations, you could always rely on woke fools like Ron Batista, who very likely will be an elected woke fool representing Hoboken and Jersey City at the county level with the county commissioners. So buckle up, folks. You know, if you've seen some bullshit activists being elected to office, like, you know, Joel Brooks and Jake Efros in Jersey City, prepárate for this campesino here who doesn't know his ass from his elbows. And unfortunately, he'll be perhaps the next county commissioner representing Hoboken and Jersey City. So from one useless elected official to a potential useless elected official, folks, Anthony Veneri and Ron Batista are always good for a laugh here in Hudson County. And those are my final thoughts. Folks, before we call it a night here, I do want to say a special comment here. And we know here at Jersey First TV and at Real Talk, it is National Police Week, where we respect, honor, and remember all the brave men and women who serve our communities in blue, whether it's municipal police departments, county police, sheriff's officers, state police, you name it, folks. This is the week from Sunday, May 10th until Saturday, May 16th, where we back the blue here. Now, we back the blue every single day, not just during National Police Week, but we do it every single day on this program. And Jersey First TV and Real Talk with Fernando Uribe are proud to do that. I'm proud to partner with multiple municipal police departments when it comes to my philanthropy, but supporting them in general. They have a tough job to do. And in recent years, where we've seen a demonizing of the police, where we have seen vitriol levied against police officers, whether it be across the river in New York, right, or here in New Jersey. We just saw it 6 years ago, where we saw idiots like Ron Batista and other, retards in our political climate here in Hudson County, demonizing the police, vilifying the police. No, folks, that's not what the police is for. It's to applaud them. Now, are there bad apples in every occupation? Sure. But Jesus Christ, we've got body cams on them. We've seen more accountability and transparency in police departments. And that's why we support the blue on this show, folks. Don't get it twisted from other journalists who want to Mickey Mouse and virtue signal. Folks, the only journalist in New Jersey, establishment or independent or otherwise, that consistently supports the blue is Real Talk with Fernando Uribe, and also Talking Politics with Fernando Uribe via the Hudson Media Group. Don't get it twisted, folks. Don't fall for the imitators. Always rely on the originator. Because we support the blue, not just during National Police Week, but we support the blue and back the blue every single day. And that's my special comment. Folks, that's our show for this week. Once again, I want to thank Assemblyman Gerard Scharfenberger for his participation tonight. Great interview with him. He's a wealth of knowledge, and I'm really, really indebted to his belief in my brand of independent journalism. Again, folks, I'll make sure you like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and X, and also subscribe to us on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Spotify or SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts. Download Jersey First. You'll never be disappointed with the great programming we bring you every single week, whether it's Real Talk, live every Monday, again, tricky local listings, or the return of Bridging the Gap, folks. We're talking about the issues that matter most to you. Not the woke bullshit, not virtue signaling, not the social justice nonsense, folks. We talk about issues that matter to you. Real life issues, kitchen table issues. Issues you're talking about with your families in your living rooms. That's what we talk about here on Jersey First TV. Always remember, folks, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's Real Talk here on the Jersey First Television Network. And as always, I am the generational talent in Garden State Media and your leader for trustworthy opinion journalism. Folks, that's right. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for the Mickey Mouse journalists. We have little Mickey Mouse shows. You have Mickey Mouse traffic. Folks, it's real traffic because it's real conversations, because it's Real Talk. And that's right. It's me, Fernando Uribe. Enjoy the rest of your week, folks. Let's go Knicks as they advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. And again, please party responsibly. We'll see you next week here, folks, on Real Talk via the Jersey First Television Network. Again, thanks for stopping by. And always remember, stay classy, everyone.